Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Welcome to the Asia Pacific DNS Forum hosted by MyNic and ICANN. I'm Jarong, the Managing Director of ICANN's Asia Pacific office based in Singapore. I'll be your moderator for today. The inaugural Asia Pacific DNS Forum will be held at the end of the month, and today is our last lead-up webinar. As mentioned previously, in a way, the APAC DNS Forum will be a lead-up event as the international community is slated together in Kuala Lumpur for the ICANN 75th meeting in September this year. Now, for this particular webinar, the topic is on the future of the DNS, and our aim for this webinar is to do a couple of things. The first is to level set and introduce the basics so everyone can join the conversation during the actual event. And the second is to see key topics which we can discuss more in depth during the actual forum. So we have quite a lot to cover, and we have some very good speakers today. And let's welcome our Ajay Data. The topic of a multilingual internet is very close to our region's hearts. And when we think about the future, we also think about a future where even if I cannot speak or type English, I can come online. So let me introduce Ajay. He's been on our forums webinars before. He wears many hats, chiefly as a businessman and technopreneur. He is well known in the ICANN community, being deeply involved in our work in internationalized domain names, and he's also the chair of our Universal Acceptance Steering Group. Jessica, can I trouble you to spotlight Ajay instead, please? Then also, still on Ajay, a couple of weeks ago, we were on a call together with the Bangladesh Minister of Post and Telecommunications. At the call, Ajay shared some great advice for the Bangladesh community to plan a strategy towards universal acceptance of internationalized domain names. And we'll be hearing more from the Bangladesh community soon. But the point I'm making is it really speaks to the high regard the regional and international community has for Ajay on this topic. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Ajay.
Thank you for your kind words here, Jerong, and thank you for the opportunity for me to serve as a volunteer here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's come to today's topic. We'll switch angles a little bit from where we left off with Jeff, but dive into something we've been pushing, which is on internationalized domain names. We've covered this topic before, but if this is the first time you're joining us from the audience, internationalized domain names, or IDNs, are basically domain names in local scripts. So you don't use the typical English alphabet as the base. So you can type a domain name, web URL entirely in your own script. Now, let's just first ask Ajay, what's your vision? When we talk about the future of a multilingual internet, what's your vision of a multilingual internet in the future?
Jerong, let's say you're asking me to paint a picture for the future of internet almost here. And let us go back 30 years back when somebody was thinking about top level domain names. Somebody was thinking about how to get the names per se, and somebody was thinking about the DNS. And those were the times. Let us not forget, there was no mobile phone, there was no Wi-Fi, there was no lease lines, there was no data, and still some infrastructure was getting built. And we are almost at the same tipping point for the language-based internet. Because in last 30 years, internet got evolved mostly in English language. All protocols, and you start from anywhere, all RFCs, all protocols, all programming languages, DNS per se, everything believes in ASCII character set. Now we are talking about the language for people who do not speak or write or read English as a primary language. Can they also contribute, and can they also participate as good as you and me can? And that's where the new internet is getting evolved, where people which is more than 75% of the world, which is very large number, who can trust the access, who can trust the names, who can trust what they see if it is in their own language. And that's where the language importance comes into a very big play. So my prediction about the future of internet is that the internet size, whatever it is today, it is going to be at least 3 to 4 times size in less than a decade in a regional language internet that will have IDNs, EAIs, and the content.
Thank you. So just playing a bit of a devil's advocate here in a way. In a way, the internet is already multilingual because content is available in all sorts of languages. But must it be on the DNS? Must there be internationalized domain names for us to realize this vision?
So I think to start with right now, IDNs and EAIs plays an important role. So let's imagine this event, MyNic and ICANN hosting APAC DNS forum, and we have a website, APAC DNS forum, right? And that's an ASCII domain name. Please imagine how does a Chinese linguist will access the domain name if he do not know English? How will he type in? He cannot. The content may be still in Chinese there, but the access is blocked for him. He cannot type the domain name per se. And that's where the key starts. So we have to break that barrier and take that barrier away so that he can come online with his choicest language to access any content. Content probably comes next, but in the word, context has come before, which is okay because English people also like to read the content in their own language, which is also serving the purpose. That's perfectly fine. But we need to also worry about the people who do not understand English and give them access to the domain names and email addresses per se. And that's where it is very, very important. So to me, domain name in a language of person's choice becomes a very fundamental for allowing him to access content in his own language. It's a very important thing. DNS is behind the scenes almost. And as Geoff, when Geoff speaks about DNS, you don't need anybody else to speak on DNS. He has covered almost everything there, and he speaks so quietly and so simply that even a non-tech person can almost understand it. So this is very important that once Geoff has said the context well, it's a huge thing which is underlying the browser, underlying every operating system, underlying every IoT device, every application. So it is almost underlined for the end user perspective. So you, me, Geoff, and the people like us will understand what's going on in the back. But as a end user, people need not to really worry about end user. So it's like when you travel in a bus or a car, you really don't worry about the road, right? You are worried about your comfort in the car. And the DNS is providing you that road, the direction, that map, where you want to reach. And that may not be the perfect example for DNS, but just for a layman perspective, this is kind of understanding. You don't really need to worry about that road at all. Road is perfect. It is being controlled well by ICANN, by other entities involved. And you just enjoy the ride to access your websites and content by traveling in your car and a vehicle, whatever you like.
Thank you. Coming back to IDNs, actually within our region, there's quite a lot of effort to push for IDNs. So IDNs are available for registration already. If like there's many of the country code top level domains, they offer IDNs like .thai. For India, there's .bharat. For Bangladesh, there's .bangla. There's domain names in Chinese scripts as well. But the progress is very slow. And why do you think this is the case?
So I guess we have not done enough. I always say that when the results are not good. So my elders, I have been hearing, when you have a tea and you say it is not enough sweet, you just add more sweet to it and become sweeter. And this is like the hard work. The amount of effort which is being done definitely has scaled up. But is it enough? Answer is no. So that's where we need to probably do more effort here. And of course, the evolution take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's an evolvement. The person who has never accessed internet before, we are trying to get him online. So we have to think more larger, not just the domain name, the website which he will need the first time he accesses internet, the content which he will need first time. So imagine that once the internet gets evolved, was getting built in 20 years before, this was largely more chat and email, nothing more. ICQs of the word, Hotmail of the word was the everybody's thing. Slowly the content came into play because people get bored. So, but how much you will chat, how much you will do dating, how much you kick the fake profiles, and this internet got evolved. Everybody, all of us have gone through that phase. The same similar kind of phase may not be the exact one is required for the new class of people who are going to access internet. So we need to really worry. This class has evolved. This class is looking for more valuable time on internet, very specific content, very specific solution. But this is not true for the class which has never accessed internet. We need to let them see the power of internet and serve them what they really need today. So for example, a farmer, if you need to bring a farmer who has never understood English, who has never traveled to a bigger city, stays in a very small town in a country, whether it is China, Singapore, or India, it doesn't matter. He will have some problem to be solved. And that problem requires to be solved for large number in rural areas, in a smaller cities, in smaller villages. And we need to pick up those solutions. So I think there is an opportunity to create another Facebook, another Amazon, another payment gateway, another thing for that class of people, though who are not looking for very sophisticated services, who are looking to solve their daily problems. And daily problem for you could be to bring food at the 10 minutes order, but for him, food is not the problem. For him, cinema hall is not there. For him, flight ticket is not important. For him, there is something else which is important. And we need to address that. That is a very important thing. And on the IDN, and I think that's where the IDNs will progress. Government of India did a fundamental, very good job to promote them right now. But I think as the conversation progresses, if we get time, I will share that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think my takeaway from what you just shared is if we want to realize a truly fully multilingual internet, it has to happen across all the different layers and the different stakeholders as well. But we're a bit pressed for time. So I'm going to see that as one thought because we want to discuss how we're going to get there during the actual forum. But let's take the last 10 minutes to all come together and we can answer any questions that the audience might have. Let's all come together. And again, from the audience, if you want to ask a question on the mic, feel free to raise your hand. And otherwise, you can type it in the Q&A chat pod. Don't type it in the normal chat because the speakers might not be able to answer them. So I'm seeing one interesting question that popped up, and Jeff has typed the answer. But while we're waiting for more questions, maybe Jeff, you can talk a bit about the question on what are the implications for DOH and DOT for DNS over HTTPS and DNS over TLS. Maybe Jeff, you can give a couple of minutes and just share the answer with everyone.
Thank you. Yes, this was just trying to emphasize this whole issue of when you're madly successful and everyone does it, how do you make changes? Now, if there are only 3 DNS resolvers on the planet, you could change 10 times a day and, that's fine. You only need to change 3 instances. But if you think of where the DNS as a piece of code is buried, it's billions of places. We're never going to change it. And so let's say that I want something else. I want a change of behavior. I'm trying to make it faster. I'm trying to make it more secure. I'm trying to do something with the DNS that I think is worth doing. The problem is that I can't change those billions of devices. I can't force everyone to buy a new piece of CPE. It isn't going to happen. And so the other way of doing this is to actually use encryption for a way that it wasn't necessarily intended. to actually directly tunnel through all of this infrastructure. No one can see what I'm doing because I'm encrypted. And I can move through that and innovate between my application and its corresponding server somewhere out there in cloud land. And so DOH and DOT is not necessarily about securing the DNS channels and reproducing the same mechanisms and structure of resolution. The real opportunity is we've unleashed a new wave of innovation that allows applications to drive at their own speed as long as they're willing to build just the little bits of infrastructure they need and ignore everything else. Pluses and minuses. Malware can do it just as easily as, serviceware. And it does make all people's job easier, including the bad people. But nevertheless, this is, I think, an irresistible move, and that we're going to embrace this if we haven't already wholeheartedly. It's a big change for the DNS to recognize we're so big, we can't change. And so we have to think differently about the way we innovate. And that's why DOH and DOT are so important.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any new questions. Maybe Jeff, you can also talk about the other question on will the virtual world use DNS?
Well, I think I said right at the front, you haven't got a network unless you all use a similar referential system. Otherwise, you've got lots of little systems that can't talk. So if you're talking virtual world, you're kind of assuming there's only one. And as soon as you think there's only one, you've then got to say, well, what glues it all together? What's the defining state that makes it one world and not 7 billion of them? And the answer really is a common referential symbol system. What's a common referential symbol system? A name system. What's our shorthand for a name system? Oh, it's the DNS. So I think even in the words, a virtual world, you're kind of assuming, although you didn't maybe think of it, but you are assuming a DNS, because otherwise you just got chaos.
Thank you. All right, I see one more question which we have time for. I think this one is for Ajay from Vivek Goyal. DNS abuse is a real problem and people who are new to the internet would be more vulnerable. Does IDNs have an inbuilt mechanism to prevent abuse because just the nature of the language makes it much more easier to create similar looking domains using non-Latin characters?
No, I think it does not change anything on DNS. Underlying, it's a puny code which gets configured into DNS even for IDN. So those who would like to abuse this will not be a very difficult thing from the DNS perspective. From the domain name perspective, abuse and attacks which could come because of the language, I think those limitations related to the knowing the language and the domain name could hamper for a little bit, but not for long. So this is not going to be very different. But let me tell you one different thing. When the internet got evolved, the security measurements were less when the ASCII domain names were being built. But ICANN designed a very wonderful system for top-level domain names on IDNs that was label generation rules. And these rules created some kind of inbuilt security in the naming system itself that may not translate to the DNS per se, but for example, similarity, for example, mixing of languages, all those things were taken care from the name perspective per se. So the abuse is likely to be less on IDNs from the name perspective. From the DNS resolving perspective, it may not change much there. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. I think there will be a few more discussions on, tied to IDNs will be things like security, also would be things like the question of fragmentation as well, which is, if I'm only using my own language and you're using yours, then will we be connected? Will we be able to communicate? But I think we are quite tight for time now, so I think we need to wrap up. I'm very grateful for all the questions coming in and the interactivity, and also very grateful to our speakers, Jeff, Ajay. Thank you for taking the time. I think we've seeded some good questions, which we will have a particular session during the APAC DNS forum to discuss. Just to wrap up, some key takeaways. The DNS, you should really see it as infrastructure, and even with the hype, it's okay. It's okay for infrastructure to be boring. I think it needs to be boring so that it's here today and it's here tomorrow. I think Jeff shared a very good point that DNS is like the common language we have all agreed to use, and it holds everything together, without which there wouldn't be Web 2, Web 3, or Web 4. Even if we go virtually, if there's no networking, we can't be connected to one another. I think, again, that's a big takeaway. In terms of the future, we're all going for bigger, faster, better. Looks like the DNS has evolved itself over the past many years. Looks like we're going to be able to continue to go there. But I think what's important also in our space is we let people know that how important this space is. And even though we might not be billionaires, but I think the work we do has significant meaning for people who are using the internet for their livelihoods on the one hand, but also for access to information, for making life better. And the next question is, how do we get there? What kind of challenges would there be? Already there were a number of areas that Jeff has described. Some at the application layer, people want to move faster. Then they would find ways to tunnel through without having to wait for everybody. But then that would have been the question again of possible fragmentation. That's something which we can discuss again during the actual forum. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Please join me again to thank our speakers, Jeff, Ajay. Thank you so much for the time. Very thought-provoking session today we had. And before we close, I would like to invite everyone to stay after the webinar to take our survey. You can click on the link. My colleagues will put a link in the chat box for you to fill up the survey. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can take our survey by visiting apacdnsforum.my. If you haven't registered, please do, and we'll see you at the actual forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks indeed. Thank you.
Bye-bye.